Great amazing morning to you, rise and shine up and at 'em. I know you all thought you were going to get some Al B. Sure. And I was ready for him too to start. I think that was Don't Wake Me, I'm Dreaming or something like that. We're just old school up in here this morning. I love it. It's such a pleasure to be here with you today. Great morning. You're officially tuning in to Coffee and Conversation with Collette, and I'm Collette. And I do my curtsy for you because that is the reference that I show you. I know that you could be anywhere preparing to do anything, and I believe the majority of you are. I wanted to say a belated happy birthday to Andre Clay. I don't know if I had reached out to you, Dre. Things have been running so fast. One of my childhood friends, and always have just been a huge supporter of this process for me, and he's all the way in the ATL. And I want to just say belated happy birthday to you, Dre. I pray that you had a phenomenal day, that you continue to have phenomenal days, you maximize your moments, and you make the most of them, as I know that you will. And for all of you on today, I pray that I reach you in a space that you are encouraged about the infinite possibilities of the day ahead, that you have learned and encouraged from what happened on yesterday, because you know that today brings a new day, and that you're in a space where everything can be better, no matter what it looks like. And so I want us to start. I wasn't going to address, let me give us the date. You know, you all know it's Thursday, July the 11th. I want to give you that. We're just flying through. We're in the midst of July already. Wow. Yeah. And I didn't want to, I was a little apprehensive about addressing the wall situation and the border situation, because I really was, who do you know me to be? If I'm not going to create a conversation where there is some level of ownership for who we are and the lessons that we learn, of course, outside of who America shows herself to be, who leadership in this United States shows us herself to be, or across this world shows us who they are, that it has to be some type of lesson for us. And so it hadn't been given to me yet of the best way to facilitate that type of conversation until yesterday. And yesterday I saw an article, and they talked about a wall. But it wasn't just the wall, the Mexican border wall, or it wasn't the Great Wall of China, and it wasn't the wall of Mesopotamia, and it wasn't, I can give you all the wall of Gungor, a history of walls that were built that either kept your enemies out, kept nomads out, kept you separated, kept you isolated, what you believed kept you safe. It wasn't that wall. It was known in Detroit as the Wailing Wall, a wall that was erected that would separate the black community and the white community. And when I saw this article, I said, wow, it's only a 6-foot wall. And I said, amazing. And we sit and focus on all these other barriers to entry, and how many people at that time knew that this concrete, this cement wall that was created in this community was really to separate black folk from white folk? Or did they just think it was a wall? You know, backyard, you have a wall. There's an alleyway, you have a wall. And so in the midst of that concept, you know me, I'm going to go a little deeper with it. And I thought about the psychological implications that we have, the barriers to entry that we present. And so I entitled our conversation today, Borders Without Walls. I'm going to give that to you again because I want you to create a visual of that phrase. Border, so you know what a border is. If you equate it to in a classroom and the teacher has that board that shows you the announcements, or if it's a holiday time and there's that border around it, the edge, the periphery, something that keeps everything intact in space in its defined parameters. Or if you are, heaven forbid, in a situation where you see a crime scene, they'll have the tape that's outlined for caution, not to go this way. It's a border. That's a restricted space, so you know that you're not supposed to go into that space. And then I delved a little bit deeper with us. I said, how many of us live in a space where psychologically, mentally, spiritually, we have borders? And either they're based on our upbringing, they're based on our socioeconomic status. For a lot of us, they're based on the skin color, our skin tones. They're based on the texture of our hair. They're based on our educational acumen. They're based on the ideology, based on what everyone else has told you, not what you have been able to create for your own. It's based on, I can't. You can't do that. How many of us as a child see children who are trying to explore? Don't do that. Children are trying to do something different. You can't do that. Children who have an interest in another field, something that you know nothing about, we don't do that. So there's a psychological border that then is created as well. So I believe that this is going to be a very interesting two-part series, because I want us to learn the history of the actual physical wall, and then I want us to address the psychological borders that prohibit us from being the best that we can be. Prohibit us from having a mindset and creating an educational acumen that causes you to understand the difference between the mind and the brain, and that you can think, and that no matter what scenario is put before you, you'll see the glass half full instead of half empty. Borders without walls. And so many of us are dealing in this space, and we always talk about it, specifically if you're in the metropolitan Detroit area, this 7.2, this downtown, everything that is ending in a town, midtown, Cork town, that it is a border. And so many of us, once you hit the boulevard, oh, they don't want us down there. That psychological impact that has you to believe that that space is not worthy of your presence, that you can't function in that space, you can't obtain success in that space, that you can't have an entertainment experience in that space, that you just can't be jovial in that space. It's no different than Belle Isle. Everyone would tell you there used to be a time where you could just go over to Belle Isle and enjoy all the beauties of this beautiful state park, but then they implemented a border. You now have to have a pass to get over into the park. It's a $12 fee that you can get when you renew your license. And so many people then say that that is prohibiting them from going to the park, because the park now has been identified for those other groups of people, so it is a border. And so now you believe that you're less than, you believe that they've created a space that you cannot go into, whether that is actual or not. And so sometimes we're dealing in a space where it's actual physical borders that show, that give you an actual depiction of what you're not able to do, where you're not welcome to go. And a lot of times then that we create those things in our mind, what we can't have. Oh, well, you didn't grow up this way. No one in our family has been married. No one has had a successful marriage. So then now you believe that you can't have that. You don't have the tools. You're not equipped for that. As opposed to all of us saying, well, guess what? We might not have grown up in that space, but that's what I desire, and I'm going to do everything that I can to make sure I'm best equipped. I was having an amazing conversation with Sean this morning, and I think that's a beautiful thing in knowing who you are, because you can't be any more to anyone else, and you can't attract what is best to you if you are not fully in understanding of who you are. And so I told him I believe that I used to have a proclivity, a tendency to attract broken people, to attract men that were broken, and however you identify it, from not having a household structure, having a different socioeconomic background, having to have a different lifestyle, having to have a different economical acumen, not even able to have those accesses to creating a space where they could be successful in this life based on how America defined it. And so I would jump in to save it. I'd bring out my S. It used to be hidden up under my clothes, my superwoman space, to be able to say that I can create something for you. I can move you behind these borders, your psychological borders. I can move you behind these actual physical walls for you. And then I had to attribute that to who I understood myself to be as a child. and the role that I have with my father and in our household, and being the one that tend to be awakened in the nighttime to have a conversation with him to balance out the life stresses and pressures that he was going through that had an impact on him and my mother not knowing necessarily how to best have a conversation with him, but Collette did. And so the ability that I felt that I had to move beyond those borders and those walls to make a situation whole. And I'm not saying that the movement in that is detrimental, that it's not for the best of you if you understand its purpose in your life. I believe that those experiences as a child, which have brought me up to these 47 years, have best equipped me to be who I am today. And I'm grateful for that. But I know in my healthy space now, in relationships, I deserve someone whole as they can possibly be. But you have to understand that, because you have to be truthful about the borders and the walls. And if we don't understand that from the actual literal sense and then to the physical, psychological, emotional sense, then we will not be able to be our best people to make the best decisions so that we can have the best lives that we can have. And so that's how I was blessed to be able to put it together today for us to engage in this conversation. So what I'd like us to do is engage with a quote. You know that that's how I do. I like to do that. And it will be from William J. Clinton. You all know him as Bill. He states, "A world without walls is the only sustainable world. If the world is dominated by people who believe that their race, their religions, their ethnic differences are the most important factors, then a huge number of people will perish in this century." I want you to think about that. I'm going to give it to you one more time again. A world without walls is the only sustainable world. If the world is dominated by people who believe that their race, their religions, their ethnic differences are the most important factors, then a huge number of people will perish in this century. And so at the end of the day, I believe that that is a space that we are right now with President Donald Trump, and he's proposing this U.S.-Mexican border, and it's an emblem of divisiveness. It's a symbolic of this political debate that we're going through on immigration. But I believe it's a bigger example of the divisiveness in the mind that then propagates and permeates throughout who we are as people of color on American soil, who are citizens of this America, in trying to navigate this world. And a lot of us don't want to be truthful and understand the symbolism of that and the psychological impact that it creates upon us. So much so that a lot of us have bought into the fact of believing that Trump was great for people of color. So much so that there are people of color who voted for Trump and support his candidacy and presidency, and will have interviews on social media about what he has done to make it better for people of color. And I'm talking about Black, Hispanic, you name it, Asian. It makes no difference, that he is the best example of what America needs to be great with this border and this wall. But not even understanding that in and of itself creates a psychological manifestation that if you really understood what he meant, that you would know that it is not of benefit to you, that America that he's talking about to make great again, in his mind does not include you. That same border, that same wall is used to keep you out of opportunities in America in your day-to-day existence. Did you think about it that way? Borders without walls. So let's go to the first clip. I want to give a historical perspective. This is the Great Wall of China, the Berlin Wall, and the history of border walls. The source for this is CNBC. And so you'll understand, at least historically, why we've created walls. So let's take a look.
Stacked brick by brick, sculpted from corrugated metal, tubes, barbed wire, concrete, or drywall, a wall, in its most basic form, is a physical barrier. Maybe it supports a roof, protects a town from floods, or separates your bedroom from the living room. In isolation, a wall is not political. But a wall can also keep people out, hold people in, and almost always create some sort of divide. In China, it's a defense system turned national landmark. In Berlin, it was an infamous blockade. And in America, it's an emblem of a fiery, divisive political debate.
Build that wall.
And sometimes when a wall is built, it eventually comes crashing down. President Trump wants to build a wall between the United States and Mexico. But what will it really accomplish?
Wall is only going to succeed at its purpose as long as there is the political will to continue to guard it.
We have to be very, very strong on the border. Border security to the people of our country, very important.
This is what some of the most famous walls in history can tell us about the US-Mexico border today. The history of walls can be traced back roughly 12,000 years. And in the beginning, they weren't nearly as socially divisive as they are now.
For most of history, walls were not controversial at all. A city was a community with walls. The belief that well-marked boundaries reduced conflict was more or less universal and arguably innate, given the tendency even of animals to mark their own territories.
Territory. It's at the core of so many walls in history. In a territorial dispute, even Wall Street got its name from, yes, a wall. It was originally built by the Dutch to protect themselves from British colonists and keep Native Americans out. The financial district has earned a reputation of vast wealth, the center of capitalism. It's become a symbol of a system that's created more wealth than the world has ever seen. But it's also earned a reputation of exploitation, deepening the divide between the haves and the have-nots. That's been ingrained in the area from its very inception. In 1644, Governor Peter Stuyvesant ordered his citizens to build a wooden barricade on the northern edge of the New Amsterdam settlement. A few years later, the Peachtree War broke out between the Dutch and Native Americans, and Stuyvesant ordered an expansion of the wall to defend against future attacks. It worked for a while, but then the British came by boat through the southern end of the colony, took the land, and named it New York. The wall itself was taken down by the end of the century, but the name stuck. In 1711, Wall Street was turned into the city's official market for a very valuable resource at the time: slave labor. And that is something that's weaved through many walls of the past, no matter how emblematic they may be. Today, you'll find one of the most iconic, grandiose walls ever built, swarming with tour groups, selfie sticks, and even shopping malls. People marvel at its sheer scale, which took a lot of human power to build.
Generations upon generations of Chinese peasants were dragged from their homes and then dragooned into these forced labor crews and required to build these walls. And if they survived the very difficult construction of these walls, they were required to live by the walls in these desolate frontier zones.
Roughly 650 years ago, the massive project was ordered by the Ming Dynasty to prevent invasions, protect the Silk Road, and preserve its culture. Some say the building process began around 200 BC, though most of that isn't standing today. From 1368 to 1644, the Great Wall was the world's largest military structure. And it's so extensive, there's no definitive record of how long it is or how much it would cost to build something like that today. People estimate its length as anywhere from 5,000 to 30,000 miles, and something of that magnitude would obviously cost tens of billions of dollars or more. These days, tourists flock to the landmark because of its almost unthinkable size. It's a very different attraction from this next wall, the DMZ. The demilitarized zone between North and South Korea is no historical emblem. To this day, it's used as a physical barrier to keep people from leaving. And it stands a tangible symbol of the separation of governments, cultures, and families who once lived together.
You know, to us, we think of it as a symbol of this military conflict, but for Koreans, it's a symbol of the division of their country.
The DMZ stretches roughly 150 miles long and has divided communist North Korea from its southern counterpart since an armistice was signed during the Korean War in 1953. The zone itself incorporates land from both sides of the territory line, and it's decorated with barbed wire fences, abandoned bridges, tunnels, guard posts, highly trained army squads, and artillery units.
These are two countries that in 70 years of division have just gone completely different directions in terms of their economies. You can't see it, to be honest, at the DMZ. You can, however, see it in the difference between the soldiers. They do send some of their tallest, fittest North Korean soldiers, but because of chronic hunger and malnutrition, they are still quite a bit smaller. than the South Korean soldiers.
But the area between the fences is surprisingly peaceful. Since nobody can enter, the lack of human interference has allowed wildlife to thrive. The wall at the DMZ wasn't the only barrier to separate the communist bloc of the Soviet Union from the West. After World War II, there was a big territorial question: which superpower would control Europe? In the 1945 Potsdam Agreement, the UK, US, and Soviet Union decided to split Germany down the middle. Berlin fell in the eastern half of Germany, but the US still wanted to keep a presence in the capital city where it helped topple the Nazis. It became an island of Western influence and a safe haven for people escaping Soviet oppression. The East German government ordered the wall's construction in August 1961.
On the dividing line between West and East Berlin, this was the sight that greeted Berliners on the morning of Sunday, August 13th. East German police and military units were busy sealing the entire length of the city's dividing line with barricades and obstructions.
The Berlin Wall came to symbolize the Iron Curtain dividing Europe. The 96-mile wall cost about $25 million to build at the time, which comes out to about $200 million today. It was 12 feet high and layered with concrete and brick, topped with barbed wire, and used more resources with the 302 armed guard towers and 55,000 landmines.
The Berlin Wall, in many ways, served as a prototype for a lot of the controversial walls of the 21st century. Here was an early attempt to build a wall which was backed by technology. You know, the Berlin Wall was a double wall with a kill zone between the inner wall and the outer wall.
Germans went to great lengths to get around, over, and through the wall. They floated over in hot air balloons, flew by zip lines, tiptoed on tight ropes, swam across the Teltow Canal, and crawled through hand-dug tunnels. Nobody knows for sure how many people were able to escape, but one estimate puts it at 5,000, and at least 140 people died trying.
The Berlin Wall was a rarity in history. It was a wall constructed to keep people from escaping rather than from entering.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
In 1989, the very people the wall was designed to divide tore it down.
A historic moment, a moment that will live forever. You're seeing the destruction of the Berlin Wall.
The next year, the region was reunified as the Federal Republic of Germany. And today, on the last remnants of the wall, you'll find a stretch of murals. It's art that's a symbol of the explosion of creativity and self-expression, a privilege that generations of people in East Berlin were deprived of. Today, there are new walls popping up all over the world. Norway, Hungary, Thailand, and more countries are turning national boundaries, once imaginary lines on a map, into tangible physical barriers to stop the flow of immigration and combat cross-border crime. And then there's the West Bank Wall. The West Bank is a complex, controversial area of land. In 1967, with tensions high, a war that lasted only 6 days left Israel with control over more land in the region. When it came to the West Bank, Israelis started building homes. Now, nearly 500,000 Israelis live in the West Bank in what are referred to as settlements. And there is still a lot of tension. There are 3 million Palestinians that also live there today. Israelis see it as an important religious land, but Palestinians see the Israelis' presence as an invasion of theirs. In 2000, an Israeli leader visited the Temple Mount, a holy area for both Muslims and Jews. Just after, there was a Palestinian uprising called the Second Intifada, and the Israeli government started constructing a wall 2 years later at the height of the conflict. From 2000 to 2005, nearly 1,000 Israelis and more than 3,000 Palestinians were killed. While there have been other clashes since, the death toll on both sides has significantly decreased since 2002.
Certainly, Israelis credit it with increased safety in Israel and in the territories.
The barrier stretches roughly 400 miles and costs $1.6 million per mile.
first it was a combination of earthen ramparts or trenches, in some places concrete wall. It also involved about 680 various roadblocks, which in 2018 are now about 705 permanent roadblocks.
The two sides don't even use the same words to describe the structure. Israelis call it an anti-terrorism obstacle, while Palestinians call it an apartheid wall.
I've traveled back and forth between the wall in Bethlehem and the West Bank and Israel, and there's a lot of graffiti on the Palestinian side of the wall, and some of it highly controversial, but interestingly, a lot of it in English, which says that the Palestinians are trying to communicate to the United States what the wall means for them.
Halfway across the world, the United States is debating a multi-billion-dollar extension for a 1,900-mile-long wall of its own. These prototypes made from concrete, tubing, and metal are standing along the border right now. They're not protecting a community from natural disasters. These walls are made to block the flow of people and drugs. It's a proposed solution for a problem that some say just isn't that urgent.
There's been a radical shift in why walls are being built. Border walls nowadays would not be effective as a deterrent to military invasion. In a world of artillery and airplanes, a wall isn't going to do much.
In March 2017, Customs and Border Patrol asked for design submissions with a pleasing color and texture on the north side of the barrier. This wall is a lightning rod for controversy among politicians, academics, and probably your family dinner table. But there's another set of people that don't agree on what the southern border should look like. And they have a pretty significant say in the future of the wall. Architects. To some, it's just another job. But to others, it's a line they're not willing to cross or design.
Architects are ethically charged with not only serving clients and serving them well, but also being guardians of the public realm and of the communities within which those buildings sit. And it seemed to us that the construction of this massive wall over such a large area was symbolic, it was divisive in how it was being put out, and it wasn't bringing the community together, it wasn't supporting the public realm, it was doing exactly the opposite.
The US-Mexico border isn't the first wall to stoke fear about what lies on the other side, and it won't be the last. But looking back at other famous walls in history, it makes me wonder how this time will be remembered.
I don't think it'll be remembered 50 or 100 years from now, to be honest. We tend to overrate our own importance historically, but when you study ancient history, not many things are remembered 50 or 100, and certainly not 1,000 years later.
Of course, that all depends on if the wall is actually built.
So appreciative of the clip from CNBC, and I want to add to her ending quote or comment that it depends on if it's built, and it also depends on if it who it has an impact on, if it is remembered. So of course the quote-unquote perceived majority, because we know that that is not actual based on numbers, that the perceived majority doesn't have a thought about the wall or will have a remembrance of the wall, because the truth is, if you are white Anglo-Saxon in these United States, what are you left out of? Where can you not go? Who prohibits you from going anyplace? What walls or borders have been constructed or erected to block you from access to anything? So I thought it was quite interesting at the end. The comment was, well, how it will have its impact on history. Well, again, it depends on who history is addressing. And there are several components to this clip, and I hope that you were really paying attention. I didn't know if you knew the history of walls throughout this world. I thought a couple of quotes, and I will say those. The areas between the fences is the calmest. Did you notice that? So in the midst of, and I believe, what was the last? It wasn't for Palestine. Maybe that was it. No, or was it from North and South Korea? That the area that actually was that safe zone that had, over this time, had been populated with animals and wildlife and the like, was the calmest. So how many of us are ever able to live within that area, in the midst of it? In the midst of everything that's going on, in the midst of where you believe you can't go and who says you can and what you should be doing and how it best governs how you function on the inside, do you ever live in a calmness, in a calmest space of that division? And then, of course, there's always one side that loses in the division. So you saw from the picture of North and South Korea, one group was much more robust and they were stronger and taller because the resources, if you looked at Seoul versus Pyongyang, and you saw that it was a thriving nightlife and the imagery and the development, and then Pyongyang was very rural still in its presentation because someone always loses. Do you know where I'm going with this? The divisions that are created only benefit those who are the dividers. Follow me. Because I need you to tell me, if not, how is that beneficial to the everyday person? How does it work? You've seen historically. I was in Europe at the time when the Berlin Wall was up, and and a lot of times you don't realize the impact of things because we can see it on TV and you can hear people have conversations about it. But to actually be in the space and see this wall, it was massive. And it was overwhelming. And it was tragic. And it was disheartening to actually see this massive entity that literally was created to separate people, based on religion, religious ideology, political gain, political posturing, and all the like. But groups of people were separated. And those died trying to escape, as you saw. And that's what we look at today. That in these separations, someone suffers. In these separations, the power base always wins, always gains. And if we realize that those people who are being separated have more in common and can amass more together than apart, where would we be? But maybe you don't have an understanding. Maybe it doesn't really correlate with you because you saw the Great Wall of China, and you saw Berlin, and you saw Korea, and you saw all these other places, Palestine. But maybe we should bring it right home. There was a wall here built in Detroit that separates whites and blacks. There was an article in the Detroit News. Wall built to separate whites, blacks in Detroit is an important story to tell. So there's a 6-foot wall, high wall, that snakes on half mile from this northeast neighborhood near 8 Mile. The article goes on to state that a gentleman, Dwight Smith, never really paid much attention to it growing up, but then he became aware of it as a middle schooler in the 1950s when classmates talked about which side they lived on. And later he visited with neighbors whose homes included a stretch of the wall in their backyard. But I have a clip. Let's look at the clip, and then we'll talk about the dynamics of the wall and what it looks like right here in Detroit. And maybe if you didn't have a correlation with the Great Wall of China and the Berlin Wall and the Palestinian Wall and all that, and even the U.S.-Mexican border wall, then maybe you'll have a relationship to the wall and the walls that are built right here in this region. Let's take a look.
Symbols of peace and hope, bright colors and beautiful artwork adorn this wall at the Alfonso Wells Memorial Playground on Burwood in Detroit. But there's another side to the wall, an ugly side that dates back to the 1940s.
This is governmentally sanctioned apartheid, where the government saw fit to actually put in a physical barrier to separate the races.
Jeff Horner is a senior lecturer with Wayne State University's Department of Urban Studies and Planning. He says the 6-foot concrete wall was built by a developer in 1941 so the federal government would approve a new housing project intended for white families only. The wall runs about half a mile near 8 Mile in Wyoming. Without it, the project was considered too risky for investment.
At least in some parts of history, there's a narrative of the federal government as an agent of progress. And there are examples of that, and then there are also very concrete examples of when the federal government required and sanctioned segregation, and not just in the South, right? This is right here in Detroit.
According to published reports, Detroit builder Harry Slatkin proposed extending the wall in the 1950s, but his proposal was rejected.
We had no idea it was a segregation wall. Like I was saying, my parents never talked about it, and neither did my grandmother.
Teresa Moon and her family moved to Burwood in 1959 when she was just 6 years old. She says she was 15 before she finally learned why the wall was really there.
I can't take away what it is, okay? I can't not tell the kids that are growing up over here now what it is and why they built it and how anybody would have the audacity to build something so minimal. It's only 6 feet high. It's 12 inches wide. I can get on my tiptoes and look over it.
The lesson is let people live wherever they want to live, eliminate racial prejudice and hatred, and I think everything will be fine.
So what does the future hold 75 years later in a country with a new president, still very much divided? Teresa says just thinking about it brings her to tears.
Stuff still happens. It's just not as blatant as this. Stuff still happens today, you know. There's some places in this surrounding community that I won't go because I know that I'm not going to be treated fairly. And that's like a few miles from here. Is it ever going to change? Are we ever going to be able to just, the color of my skin is not going to matter? I don't know. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen. Hopefully it's going to get better, especially for the kids, for the future.
At Detroit's 8 Mile Wall or Wailing Wall, I'm Robin Schwartz for the Detroit Jewish News and the Detroit Journalism Cooperative.
For those of you who are local in this region, did you know about the Detroit Wailing Wall? Or were you familiar with it? So appreciative of the clip from the Detroit Public News and Detroit Public Television and the journalists and the association who put the article with a visual together. Did you know about the wall? And then did you get the tell-all piece at the end? And thank you, young lady, Ms. Smith, in the interview. She said that there's still areas that she today, a few miles away, doesn't feel comfortable enough in going in. And so that's that psychological border I talked to you all about. That's without a wall, but you clearly have an understanding that this is not an environment that I need to be a part of, that I'm going to be welcomed into, that I don't feel safe in, I don't feel comfortable in because I am a black person in this region. What do our walls look like? How do they really impact us? Did you note that at that time that it was part of government, and we go back to government, that the wall had to be built to appease the federal government who wanted to build the White Housing Project, and they believed that if the wall was there to separate the communities, that would justify their investment in funding. Government now, federal government, and when we work, we pay taxes into the government. And so what does that tell you about the government? And you know where I'm going. In this same government that we give all of our power to, that believes that it's going to create policy and legislation that's going to be of benefit to us as people of color, but this is the same government who has sanctioned building a wall. People are the government. Do you get that? So as much as you put hope in this group that's supposed to legislate and create policy, the policy is not what dictates the people dictate the policy. So if I embrace this, that is the policy that I create. If I have issues that have something to do with believing that I'm superior, that other people are less than, that they should not have privileges, even though this is America, but I'm in the power seat to create legislation and policy, then I'm going to create that benefits who I believe it should benefit. And then I call that government, and then I call it law. Do you get that? Do you get where we are today? Or maybe not. Let me go to the lines. They're all lit and see what you have to say. Thanks for your patience. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
You know, I was raised over there.
Wow.
My father had a house in 1945.
Okay.
Okay, and that house was built on the other side of the wall. I say would be the east side of the wall. Okay, and farther than Wyoming. Okay, and there was a 13-block area that houses were built. Now understand, when you say government did this, who insured the loan to build that house? That house. Okay. Yeah. So and it happens today. You know what's called a mini or whatever, the people that went broke on this financial crisis with the housing thing.
Yes.
Okay, that money was insured by we the people who are paying it back now. Okay.
Yes.
Through tax dollars. Okay. And when you look at Detroit, I just marvel at the history of it. Woodward was a dividing line between East Siders and West Siders.
Nice.
I don't care. Have you been here a long time? People will say, what side of Detroit you live on? You live on the east side? Live on the west side. Now you go down a little further, and you say, oh, I live over there by Davidson, Coney Gardens. All those names, they changed the names of places. And we have, the powers that be in this city, wherever you want to know who they are, anybody that's lived here, you know who they are. I've had to discuss who they are, has always divided this city. I don't care which way if you really look and understand it. Okay. And if you think they want to overcome this, those things are embedded in us. I'm not sorry. I'm not apologetic. I'm a Detroiter.
Okay.
I am not leaving. My roots are here. My family's here. Anything I do is I'm going to be stay here but I understand it.
Yes.
I understand it. So I hear those messages, and I heard you say about going downtown. The downtown was, they used to roll up the sidewalks in downtown, and it was you didn't go down there. Okay. You know, you went down there, but you have to understand the difficulty. When I say difficulty, the expressways weren't here. The route of travel wasn't here. You had to get on the bus. How many people owned a car in 1950?
Okay.
How many households owned a car in 1950?
Okay.
I mean, and so things are different. And those are better things now. We own 4 or 5 cars.
Okay.
But the dividing lines are here. And who profits? You're correct. Somebody wins and somebody loses. When change comes, somebody's going to lose and somebody's going to win.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Okay. Now, if you're looking, there's a lot of vacant land in Detroit, primarily on the east side, because that's the oldest part of the city. They're going to build something over there. Yes. Who's going to make the money to build it?
Yes.
Whether it be the workers, whether it be the developers, what are you going to use the land for? Yeah. When all you talk about this discussion about growing marijuana, I mean, the east side, the reason people they grew gardens. Right. You can still take that land and grow things on it.
Yes. Yes.
Now, but there's ordinance to say you can you do this? Now, people say, hey, I want to live in Oak Park. There are ordinance. You can't have a garden in Oak Park. You got to get your cars off the street. That means you got to have a driveway. You got to have a guard. So it put up barriers of how you're going to live.
Yes.
And it is decided by we the people. Maybe it's decided by we the people. I don't have a problem. I think I know how to manipulate this system as best I can. Okay. But I manipulate it for my family. If any problem I have is my family is not as educated, or they just think that you don't know what you're talking about. I have to let them get their nose all burned up before they figure out, I guess I should have said something to you.
Right.
Not that I have all the answers. I don't have all the answers. I'm not telling you that. I don't have but this is still the best place in the world to live in.
It is.
As far as I know.
It is. I appreciate your call and your insight, and make sure you're going to get everyone in on today. And I agree with the caller. I still believe, I don't care what anybody says, that America, being an American citizen, is the best opportunity that you're going to have to create the life that you want. That's what I believe. Now, only because this is the environment. What do they say? Like New York, it's concrete jungle. If you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. It's a mindset. And so no matter what, if you can make America work then, and you know about America, you know about the injustice of America, you know about the truths of America, you know about the borders and the walls that were erected, and physically or psychologically, if you're truthful about that and you understand what you're supposed to do in it, then a wall becomes a bridge. But let's see what you have to say. Thanks for your patience. Good morning to you. Caller, you there?
Hello. Can you hear me?
Can you speak up a little?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay, good morning.
Good morning.
I want to tell you that I was born and raised in Detroit.
Okay.
And I didn't know anything about that wall until 3 years ago.
Wow.
And I found that out. Reverend Faith Fowler took a group of people over to see that wall.
Okay.
I was devastated.
Mm.
Because she is a white woman. And why did a white woman have to show me that wall? And I went to Mumford High School, so near the wall.
Right. Right.
But anyway, I want to say this. Thank you for bringing that up.
Sure.
I want to say this. We need to become more engaged in what's going on in the city.
Okay.
And when I say engaged, I mean pick up the paper.
Okay.
Know what's going on in your community. Help people on your block.
Okay.
Understand that we need to rake the grass, cut the grass, pick up the paper. And then there was something on TV last night, and I'll go,
Okay.
that said houses were worth now $200,000 on Avery. For those of you who don't know where Avery is, it's off of Grand River.
Yeah.
And near Wayne State University.
Yes.
And you can make your street Avery.
Ah. So you know what? I have a question for you because I know. Great morning, Stephanie. I always catch your voice. Let me ask you briefly. Talk about the division and the borders for class because you shared with me several stories of how you grew up and your upbringing and being a part of certain groups and certain, your family where you grew up in a group of professionals. Your mom was a nurse, your dad was an accountant at that time. And so you were in a group in and of itself that was not an ideal situation in this environment either. So there were borders and walls that separated you either directly or indirectly. Is that correct?
Oh, that is very correct. I grew up in a Jewish community.
Okay.
And at that time, we thought we were all friends until a little girl down the street told my sister, I'm having a birthday party, but you can't come.
Ah.
Even though we were all professionals, supposedly living together. Yes. This was a little girl 4 years old.
Right. Right.
So where did she hear that?
Right.
We thought we had it, everything.
Yeah.
But you can't come to my birthday party.
Yes.
But we never said that to her.
No.
We're having a party and you can't come.
No, because I believe that the truth of the matter is we've always been aspirational. And so who we are as a people is that we had to do as much, work harder, be smarter, do better to amass what that majority group has had. So when those of us who have amassed that success and professional lifestyle were able to move into those affluent communities where there were, at that time in Detroit, Jewish families were living, then we believe that we own the right, because of who we worked hard to become, to be there. And in their positioning, it was, oh no, it's time for us to get ready to go. That's probably why they didn't want to invite you to the birthday party, because they were about to pack up so they can get ready to move, because they didn't want us in those communities. Because there was a wall, it was a barrier, it was a border that was understood that this is where we are, and no matter how much you do, how hard you work to obtain this American dream, you're still not good enough.
Oh, absolutely. We had relatives on the east side that, okay, we're going to go on the east side. We can't go often because we lived on the west side. This was our family.
Come on.
But there was something about the east side that divided us.
Yes. And to this day, it still does. To this day. People still, they'll say, well, oh, you must be from the west side, look, because of how you look or how you talk or how you dress. To this day. Everyone.
And did you go to Cass? Oh, you didn't go to Cass? Oh, my. So I'm going to ostracize you.
Right.
From
absolutely.
The world.
Yes. So everyone, I mean.
You maybe went to Northwestern.
Yeah, and I went to King. So how's that? I appreciate your call. So everyone, that has set the tone for our conversation on today. We're going to continue it on tomorrow because we're dealing with borders without walls. We've given prime examples of what actual walls, the history of walls. Right in this region, we've talked about the different barriers and borders that have been erected in our minds, socioeconomic status, skin color, class, education that has kept us separate amongst ourselves as people of color, and definitely separated from these groups that we were so aspiring to be. So I want you to think about it on today, because we're on tomorrow going to add another component, the actual walls, the barriers. At our 8 o'clock hour, Eddie Treadwell will be a part of the conversation. He was moved to a new correctional facility in Michigan, and wait till you hear about this. You talk about borders, you talk about walls. I couldn't believe it when I heard it. But on today, my takeaway and the ending quote is, we build too many walls and not enough bridges. That was from Isaac Newton. We want a bridge. I'm here to bridge the divide. We're going to learn, we'll be better, we'll make the most of our moments, and we'll become better because of the real conversations that we have. I pray that you have been educated, enlightened, and empowered today. Share this information with someone. We're back tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. for more conversation, a little bit of coffee, and you. Make today amazing, make your moments better. I'll see you then.